Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Fatboyz Dynasty Podcast, hosted by the Fantasy Holics Podcast Network on the YouTube channel. Back live at our normal time, Brand. It feels good to be back. I know I'm sore from all the walking and climbing excessive amounts of stairs that we had to do for the water park last week. Thankfully, nobody had to open any tubes or anything like that. So,
is the water park closed for construction after you walk
No.
all over that?
Nope. Thankfully, Wisconsin, they had that, the water was deep already. It's probably just a little deeper. If I did any cannonballs, I probably sank the bottom of the pool a little bit, moved concrete, if you will. But my dogs were barking, if you will. The calves were hurting. The hammies were hurting. It was good to get home and sit in a chair for 24 hours and do nothing. So
you had your OTA week this week, huh?
I did. Yes, I did. And I was cut. My wife cut me, said, where we can't keep you. Sorry, it's just not going to work out. So yeah, licking my wounds a little bit, but here we are nonetheless.
All right. It's
good
to be back.
Yeah, so we came at you last week, and we finished up our dynasty buys, and then we hit everybody with ourselves last week. This week, it took a lot of crunching. You and I have really had to hit the calculator hard, really get our nose into the computer screens, if you will. And here we are. We've got our running back rankings. We've already had a pretty healthy debate backstage. We'll see if that carries over at all into the show here. But nonetheless, I think I'm excited, Brant, to get these running back rankings out there. Anytime you put as much work into it as we have these last 2 weeks to get these running back rankings ready, it's always bittersweet when the show comes, but it's exciting.
Oh, yeah, definitely got into these running backs. It took me a little longer than I expected to get them done. I don't know how much I feel about getting into these receivers when we get those rankings done, because there's going to be a lot more names. But
Sure.
This was fun. I'm glad we divided it up, and I know we'll put ours two together. We'll get our top 12, top 24 out, try to get it typed up the best we can. I know I'm not the greatest with these keyboards or texting or typing at all. But maybe we'll get them typed up, or maybe we'll send them to somebody that's a little better at it. But we definitely want to get the Fatboyz rankings out on our page.
Absolutely. One of our wives is just going to have to take one for the team and get on the computer for us. But
I got my daughter. Paisley will take care of it for me.
Perfect. We'll have to get her a internship going here with the Fatboyz and the Fantasy Holics. So, Brant, are you ready to eat?
I'm ready to eat.
Let's put the bibs on. Brant, I don't know about you, but I never get tired of seeing that flying high kick from that super athletic young man that was in that picture.
Yeah, it was back in our prime.
Back in our prime. We haven't got there yet, buddy. We're still getting there. All right, Brant. So obviously, if we were to go through every one of these teams that we broke down, we'd have to put out like 60 different running backs on today's episode. So obviously, we don't have time for that. The folks don't want to listen to that. So why don't we highlight the best player in each division, and then maybe the worst fantasy projected player we have in each division, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds good to me. And guys, if you're listening in right now and you're on the live, if you want to hear about a certain team, shoot us in the comment. We'll try to circle back to it, because we both broke down teams, and we absolutely would love to get some interactions with you guys. And especially if you guys are listening to it afterwards, shoot us an email if you want to hear about our projections or see it. We're more than happy to send them to you.
Absolutely. All right, Brent, let's go through the NFC first. And I think it's only fair that we start at the NFC North. So that is your division. So take us through the highest player and the lowest player you projected there.
I'm gonna start with the lowest, and it's not a player; it's a three-headed monster. And I did some thinking. Originally, I was only gonna go with two backs, and then next thing I know, I had all three of them, and then I'm dividing numbers and pounding numbers and throwing calculators. And next thing you know, I come up with the Chicago Bears, and Justin Fields somehow isn't in there. I guess because he technically is a quarterback. But I had to take all of his numbers into consideration too when I put it. So I did all three running backs. I'm going to start with the top of it. The Deontay Foreman, I think, sees the most carries. But I have him as the most carries, but I have him at the least amount of fantasy points because I don't think he finds the end zone as much, and I don't think he's too heavily involved in the passing game. I am for 102 total fantasy points this year, and that's with him only getting in the end zone twice. I just don't see him being that guy to push the pile. And then I'll talk about the rookie a little more in depth. I have Roschon Johnson with 115 total carries, 437 yards. I do have him for 4 rushing touchdowns. I have him involved a little more in the passing game with 26 receptions on 30 targets, 144 yards, and 2 more receiving touchdowns. That's 120 points there for him, 120.1 fantasy points. And the highest was Khalil Herbert. I have him for 130 carries at 715 yards, 5 total touchdowns because that breakaway speed. I think he gets away, and I think he puts a few more in the end zone. I have him for 22 receptions, 170 yards, and 3 more receiving touchdowns. I just think Khalil Herbert sees a lot of excess work. I think he's the breakaway guy they have right now, and I think he's going to be the guy that they trust early in the season. And I think you slowly see Johnson worked in, and I think you see Foreman just kind of stealing work here and there. That's why I think eventually he does. Foreman will take the third down carries. I don't see him being the goal line back, though. But we'll see how that goes with that backfield. That was the toughest one that I had to do.
So, Brant, is it fair to say then that if you had to pick a running back from the Chicago Bears backfield to own, it's just easier not to pick one?
Yeah. Right now, what's funny is we just did a draft in our little league, and I picked Johnson and Foreman, and then I start crunching numbers, and surely I did not even pick the best one that I had for the most points in that backfield. I picked the other two. So I think if you're forced to take one of those, I honestly think Khalil Herbert might be the guy. But It ain't going to help you a whole lot.
All right, and who did you have? Where's the best backfield?
Best back right now, Alexander Madison. There's nothing competing with them. You look at the Lions, they have competition. Look at Green Bay, competition. The Lions, it's Alexander Madison now. And I have him down for 240 carries, 1,005 yards, 9 rushing touchdowns. The man was explosive and a great running back when he was used with Cook being hurt. I have him for 70 targets, 53 receptions, 318 receiving yards, and 3 more touchdowns through the air. I have him at 257.3 fantasy points. He was, I believe, the 4th or 5th highest back that I did on my out of my 4 divisions. So he's definitely a guy that I'm really looking forward to. I'm happy that I held on to him in the 2 leagues that I had Cook, and I'm going to dread going against him.
Absolutely, Brant. That's fair. All right, let's move on to the NFC East, Brant, which is a division that I took. This one was a little more, a little easier for me, if you will, minus one thing that I may circle back and talk about later, depending on if we have time or not. But I'm going to start with the backfield that I think has the most fantasy points coming out of one back, and that's the New York Giants. As long as Saquon Barkley doesn't Le'Veon Bell this holdout, make it a whole season deal, obviously these rankings will change significantly, Brant, and the projections will change if he decides to actually set out gameplay. But I have Saquon Barkley this year for 287 carries, 1,291 yards off of those carries to go along with 9 rushing touchdowns, another 70 targets coming his way out of the backfield for 55 receptions, 390 yards receiving, and 2 additional scores coming of the way of pass catching, giving him 289.1 fantasy points this year. This is coming in. That'll be, a little drop off from where Saquon was last year, but last year Saquon had a pretty magical season. I'm not sure it's that good this year. I think There's going to be more weapons at the very least. With the addition of Darren Waller, the passing game is going to be a little bit better and should be more of a focal point of that offense, but not enough to knock Saquon out of the best running back in the division for me.
Okay. So you talked about this holdout, and you saw Le'Veon Bell come out and talk about how that was the worst thing possible for him. So I don't think Saquon will hold out the whole season, but let's say he does. The Saquon owner's worried. Who do you put your trust in as his backup?
There's a couple names out there that haven't signed yet. And if Saquon holds out, or the Giants think that's a possibility, maybe they go knocking on a Zeke Elliott or Kareem Hunt. So I'm not sure the answer's on the team yet. They have a rookie there. I don't know. I think Saquon ends up playing. I don't think it's a holdout. I don't think it happens. So
I'm in the same boat with you. If he does and it gets worse and worse, I don't think the back's on the team yet. So I'm actually in the same boat with you on that. So if you're a Saquon owner, go grab Matt Breida if you're worried. Other than that, make sure you're paying very close attention to the Giants, because that will tell you if they go out and they sign an Elliott, a Fournette, a Hunt. That's going to tell you probably a lot about this holdout.
Sure it will. All right, Brant. So for the least fantasy points out of a backfield, I'm going to go to the Washington Commanders. And this one surprised me a little bit, because I similarly to what happened to you when you went and figured out the Chicago Bears, happened to me when I figured out the Washington Commanders. I kind of expected this to go one way, and it went the opposite, and it kind of had me scratching my head here. But we're going to start with Brian Robinson, the guy I expect to be most of the grounding and pounding. I actually have him taking almost 100 more carries over Antonio Gibson here, but I have him going for 224 carries, 876 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns on the ground, to go along with another 13 receptions for 54 yards, coming in at 130 fantasy points on the season. Antonio Gibson, I have at 127 carries, 530 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. And then where he's going to make his money, I have him having 66 targets, 58 receptions, 406 yards receiving, to go along with 4 touchdowns. So I have him with a total touchdown lead as well as a total yardage lead over Brian Robinson. I have him at 186 fantasy points on the season. So both of these running backs, Brant, I think will have some value, especially on bye weeks. I'm not sure either one of Antonio Gibson nor Brian Robinson are guys you're going to want to start week in and week out here.
Yeah, absolutely. That probably would have been one. I'm kind of glad I shied away from it, because I probably would have been doing the same thing with that. But yeah, I think you absolutely hit it perfectly there. I think you got your running back in Brian Robinson and your receiving back in Gibson. And the Commanders will be they'll be a head-banging team to watch fantasy-wise, but they might actually be a pretty fun team offensive-wise to watch, with Sam Howell underneath center, and to see what they actually turn into. They have a good coach that we've seen do a lot of things pretty well with his running backs and receivers. So Washington's going to be a headbanger when it comes to fantasy-wise, but it'll be interesting.
Are you telling me you're getting on the boat driven by Riverboat Ron? Is that what we're doing right now?
I like Riverboat Ron. I don't really want to invest in a whole lot of fantasy with Riverboat Ron, but I will get on that boat and watch that team. I'll watch toot.
All right. Here it is. Brant's on the Washington Commanders Super Bowl champs this year. All right, Brant.
Division champs.
Wow, still a bold take with the Philadelphia Eagles. All right. Why don't you go ahead and take us through the NFC West, the home of your Seattle Seahawks, Brant?
I don't want to.
That good, huh?
I don't want to. I did get my beautiful shirt for Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there. But that just had to be tie-in with Walker. I'll go ahead and talk about the Seattle backfield. And I really wanted to lean and just delete Charbonnet out of there, because I am a Kenneth Walker owner, but you can't. I have Zach Charbonnet going for 150 carries, 600 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground, 40 receptions, 210 yards, and 2 more touchdowns through the air at 151 total points. And this one hurts a little bit. I do have Kenneth Walker going for 70 more carries and 220 attempts, 942 yards, 8 touchdowns on the ground, only adding 23 receptions, 129 yards, and adding 1 or 2. I was at like 1.5, so I did round up on this and put 2 in my projections for 190.1 fantasy points. So neither one is going to break 200 in my mind. I think Kenneth Walker still is the one to own, but it definitely will be a backfield that I think it will be a very Pete Carroll-like backfield there, to say the least. But we also have seen Chris Carson come in and as an undrafted or 7th-round draft pick and take over the lead back before. So only Lord knows what Pete's going to do, but I expect it to be a pretty fairly evenly split.
Pete doesn't know what Pete's going to do, nor will he remember tomorrow, so it's fine.
That is true. That is true. But he will remember where the bubblegum guy is, because they have a bubblegum guy there in Seattle that carries the case around. I've put my application in. So my highest one, that's real simple. It's Christian McCaffrey. As long as the man stays healthy, can't go wrong owning this man. I have him for 225 carries, 1,040 total rushing yards, 11 touchdowns on the ground, 95 targets, 75 receptions, only 600 receiving yards for this running back, but another 5 touchdowns. He is probably the highest back that I believe I ranked, and I have him at, oh, nope, I'm sorry, he is not the highest I have. I do have him at 335 total fantasy points. He definitely is one of the higher ones that I do have. And it is Christian McCaffrey. So as long as he's healthy, I don't see anybody in that backfield threatening him.
Okay, that's fair. All right, Brant, let's go to the NFC South. I'm going to start off with a backfield. This is one of them you and I kind of talked about a little bit pre-show. We really weren't that far off on this guy. And let me tell you, I do have running backs lower than him projected, but I also in this division, but I also have guys higher. Kamara was slightly higher than Miles Sanders, and Rachaad White was considerably higher. But Miles Sanders, I still think, is going to have a very serviceable season. He's going to be relevant in fantasy, Brant. I've got him rushing the ball 219 times for 1,051 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns to go along with 31 receptions, adding 235 yards and another 2 touchdowns for 207 fantasy points. Now, I can understand wanting to see his receptions to go up a little bit with a rookie quarterback, especially a rookie quarterback that's small in size who, let's be honest, he may be looking out to the flats quite a bit for a guy like Miles Sanders, but I do still believe in Chuba Hubbard just enough that I think he's going to get some work somewhere, somehow in this backfield, and that just wouldn't have been a thing that I could have bought into if I had Miles Sanders for much more points. And Brant, let's be honest, I've never really been a Miles Sanders truther. You know that since he's been in the league. One of our very first ever fantasy football trades you and I conducted was Miles Sanders involved in that trade. So, yeah, I'm just not, a super huge Miles Sanders believer to begin with. But again, I don't think I'm that crazy low on him, just low enough that I have to save a little bit of space for Chuba Hubbard, Brant.
Absolutely, and I know you've been on that Chuba train for since he came out, actually before he came out, so I can't hate you on that one. Sanders is a guy that we will be consistently. I'm not even going to try it because I can't get my words right. He will be posted. We will add up our numbers and have something posted because we are very similar on his workload this year. So definitely, I absolutely like what you have with Sanders, and I know you can't just give up on Chuba yet. It was kind of like me and a name that we have named multiple times on a guy that I just could not get rid of off my fantasy roster.
Sure. Kenny Galladay. So, all right, and then obviously, Brant. I am a little leery when it comes to Alvin Kamara this season. I still think there's a small chance that he may get some kind of a suspension this year. It's been awful quiet in the Kamara camp lately, and that may be by plan. So I can't quite give him the nod in this division. And it was just too easy for me to go ahead and go with Bijan Robinson as the guy to lead this division. I have him carrying the ball 323 times for 1,465 yards rushing. To go along with 11 touchdowns, 54 targets, 49 receptions, 357 yards, and 2 touchdowns, coming in at 300 309 points fantasy this year. I think he's going to end up being a huge bell cow for Atlanta. I think he's going to be one of the best young running back assets to own for the foreseeable future, and just a guy that I'm completely sold on at this point, Brant.
Okay. And I just can't quite fully get on that train. Algier showed too much. I know we were well off with that projection there of Bijan. I think he will have an outstanding season. It will be very interesting to see. Atlanta was the most run-heavy team last year, so he could get in there and he could just get thrown to the wolves. I think they're going to hold back on him a little bit, but we'll have to wait and see how this season plays out. I still think he'll probably be, I'd have to go through, but I have him probably right there in the top 10, if not right outside of it.
All right, Brant, let's move on to the AFC at this point, and we'll do it the same way. We'll go north, east, west, and south. And I know that's going to have me talking quite a bit and then you, but maybe we'll go north, south, east, west. All right, starting with the north, Brant. This was a division that was honestly the closest I had any two running backs. I actually had three running backs in this division separated by less than 4.5 points total. And then two of the running backs I had separated by 1/10 of a point for being the best running back in the league in this division, and that was Nick Chubb and Najee Harris. I was honestly a lot higher on Joe Mixon than I thought, just because, again, nothing has come down at this point. So I'm projecting as if Joe Mixon's going to be the guy there. So, but it was not Joe Mixon that I had at the top spot. It was Najee Harris, Brant.
Love it.
The Steelers did a lot to address their offensive line. Kenny Pickett should be a little better out of the pocket this year. Again, should open some run lanes for Najee. I've got him carrying the ball 305 times, 1,206 yards, rushing 7 touchdowns to go along with 43 receptions, 258 yards receiving, an additional 2 receiving touchdowns for 243 fantasy points, Brant.
I'm absolutely in love with what you got there. I love Najee this year. I love what the Steelers did. They know where their best weapon is, and it's Najee. And we know what Tomlin loves to do is pound the ball. So guess what? It should be Najee pounding the ball. And as long as the man stays healthy, he is going to be a great fantasy back.
Absolutely. All right, Brant. This one is going to hurt you a little bit deeper because this is another man that you've held on to just as near and dear as you can in one of our home leagues here. But I do have J.K. Dobbins having the
you're wrong.
the least fantasy relevant out of any of the starting running backs in this division. I think J.K. Dobbins is good enough that there's not going to be any Gus Edwards barking up his tree this year or anything like that. It's just the guy that plays quarterback still a better running back than J.K. Dobbins. There's still injury issues to that knee or ligament issues potentially. We'll see. I'll put my numbers out there. You can see where you're at with him. I've got him carrying the ball 260 times for 1,140 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns to go along with 18 receptions, 117 yards receiving, and 1 additional touchdown. So my thought process on this, Brant, is just simply that he isn't going to get the goal line work. I think that'll either be Gus Edwards or Lamar Jackson running the ball in. And that's kind of where I'm at. I've got his rushing numbers pretty high. I think he does a lot of really good work in between the 20s. I just don't see it happening inside the 20.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with his receiving work. There's too many options there for a quarterback that can't throw the football. So I don't think he's going to be part of that receiving game. I know as much as I want him to be, there's a quarterback there that can't throw the ball. And the quarterback has all the options in the world to throw it, but he won't.
That quarterback throws the ball just as good as Uncle Rico does.
Yeah. So Uncle Rico may hit his running backs though. So we all know how that goes with a rushing quarterback. They don't dump off very often. So I think you probably hit the nail on the head. If you're in a standard league, I think J.K. Dobbins is phenomenal to own as your RB1. Like you said, he's going to have plenty of rushing opportunities, but in a PPR league, he's not a guy that I trust as my one. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure I need Mixon to not get suspended, or I'm going to be starting J.K. Dobbins as my RB1.
No, you got ETN still.
Go ahead. ETN.
Go ahead and go through the NFC or the AFC South for us, Brant.
AFC South, It's pretty easy. I'm back on the Jonathan Taylor train. That's the man that's going to lead the backfield for the AFC South. I don't have him balling out like he did 2 years ago. I do have him with a great number. I have him with 275 total fantasy points, 280 total carries, 1,250 yards, 10 rushing touchdowns. This one is where it really got difficult with Anthony Richardson being there because I really don't know how he's going to use Taylor. I do have him for 52 receptions, 260 yards, and 2 more touchdowns through the air receiving. I have, like I said, 275 points. There's not a whole lot you can't say about Jonathan Taylor. Actually, I'm sorry. He's actually my second one. It's Derrick Henry, but I don't have to talk about what Derrick Henry does. He's going to ball out like he does. Jonathan Taylor is the guy that I wanted to talk about. Apparently, I just started pretty quicker than my eyes did. But Derrick Henry, I have for 289. So,
okay.
My least favorite. Do you got anything to add about Taylor? I know you.
My one thing I will say about Taylor is I think you might be for my preference, Brandon. I think you've got his rushing numbers pretty spot on. I worry about his reception ability this year, just because it's just as easy for a guy like Anthony Richardson with his athletic upside to tuck that ball and take off running than it would be to throw it to a 5-yard safety blanket sitting in the flat. So, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Anthony Richardson really just that he bounces out of the pocket and Jonathan Taylor's there as a safety valve when that corner leaves its guy and comes and picks him up. I don't know. We'll see. But I do worry about Jonathan Taylor's PPR value this year in that regard.
Absolutely. So that's going to lead me into the worst backfield with probably the worst team in the NFL, and that's the Houston Texans. I have Pierce. I really didn't want to, but I have Pierce lead backfield. 198 carries, 910 yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, 42 receptions, 231 yards, adding 1 more through the air. 204.1 fantasy points for Pierce. For Singletary, I have him at 117 attempts, 503 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns because I think Pierce will be the pounder. I have him for 38 receptions, 201 yards, and 2 more touchdowns, 138 fantasy points. So if you got to own a back there, Pierce is a very valuable asset. Singletary he's going to be the handcuff. I know he has had his explosive shows at time, but Pierce was a guy that led him last year, and I think Pierce leads him again this year.
Yeah, Devin Singletary, I think, is going to have some value there as well as a bye week running back, just kind of like you had mentioned. Listen, this new coaching staff, they don't have any loyalty or any reason to be loyal to Dameon Pierce. They weren't there when he got brought in. But who they went out and brought in as a priority? Devin Singletary. So it'll be really interesting to see how the whole Dameon Pierce, Devin Singletary dynamic shakes out. I do think you're pretty right, Brandon. I think it's going to be a lot closer to a 50-50 split than most people would expect. So kudos to you on that backfield. I think you're right on with that one there.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the AFC East here as the last division that we have to hit. And I'm going to start with the lowest team here because I think the most should be pretty obvious, Brant. But I actually have the Miami Dolphins as a backfield that I really don't want to be a part of. And it was very, very close with the Buffalo Bills. But I did give the Buffalo Bills 1-2 punch a little bit higher of a nod than I gave the Miami Dolphins 1-2 punch. Last year, the Dolphins 1-2 punch was Jeff Wilson Jr. and Raheem Mostert. This year, I expect it to be Jeff Wilson Jr. and Devin Achane. So that's who I've got statted out here for you, Brant. I've got Jeff Wilson Jr. with 180 carries, 792 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns, 27 targets to go for 21 receptions, 161 yards receiving, 1 touchdown for 146 fantasy points. Very low on Jeff Wilson, obviously, as the Dolphins backfield pretty consensusly. Devin Achane, I have 105 carries, 483 yards, 2 touchdowns, 37 targets for 32 receptions, 211 yards, and an additional 2 touchdowns for 125 fantasy points. Raheem Mostert, I do have a little note here. I would have him around 111 fantasy points, Brant. So I think the backfield scores pretty regularly. I'm not sure this is going to be one of those backfields where you can plug a guy in and say he's going to have a good week this week. I'm rolling my gut here. So this is going to be one of those backfields, Brant, that on Sunday mornings when we're doing our live start sit with folks, you're going to pick a guy, I'm going to pick a guy, and guess which one it's going to be that goes off? The one that neither one of us pick. Yeah.
Yes. That's a bye week fill-in backfield if I've ever heard of one, and hope you're right on your bye week. Or maybe one's injured. I don't know. It's going to be a rough backfield to own.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be no fun to watch.
Yeah, you better hope, again, knock on wood, you don't want to ever root for somebody to get injured. But if you own one of these backs, the only way you're ever going to be playing them confidently is if one of the others isn't there.
Yeah.
One backfield where I think you'll start somebody fairly confident, Brant, is the New York Jets with Breece Hall. I've got Breece Hall carrying the ball 255 times this year for 1,326 yards, 8 touchdowns, 75 targets, 51 receptions, 408 yards receiving, and an additional 2 touchdowns for 284 fantasy points.
Man, when's the last time we had like 3 episodes in a row that we've talked about the Jets? The Jets.
Hey, we said it last year, baby, and I'm still there. Jets to the moon.
The Jets. I think they didn't bring anything that scares me in there. They actually let go the one back that may have scared me a little bit in James Robinson, and then he went to New England and got cut. Obviously, there's something we're all missing. I'm sorry, James Robinson. We both root for you, but there's obviously something not right. Breece Hall's easily the guy to own there in New York, and easily the one to own in probably that whole division. I'll go ahead.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, Brant. This is something that I started thinking about as soon as I clicked play on the episode, and we can get into a couple other backfields here in a second. But we just come off of our dynasty buys and our dynasty sell episodes coming into this. After you put pen to paper and came up with some of these projections, is there a running back here that you would like to sell versus a running back that you would like to buy that maybe you didn't look at that running back in that light prior to this?
The one I want to sell is Isaiah Pacheco.
Tell me about it.
I haven't got to that division yet, but I just don't trust it. I've looked through the stats there in Kansas City, and they use too many backs, and I just don't know if I could trust it. I mean, McKinnon balled out at the end of the year. They still have CEH there. I just don't think they have a clear-cut one, and right now that hype train with Pacheco is absolutely through the moon with everyone, and I just think that's the guy that I would be trying to sell right now just because I don't trust it. I think I do have him serviced out. I'll talk about him actually here in just a second.
Brant, you go ahead with the division. I got way ahead of myself, and I apologize to you. For some reason, I was thinking I was the it there. Go ahead. So please go ahead after you finish telling us about Pacheco, and then we'll get back into this.
I'll snap Pacheco's off right now. I have him for an absolutely good season, but I have him for 204 carries, 878 yards. I do have him for 7 touchdowns, 42 receptions for another 2 touchdowns, 217 points. I have him for a great season, but I just don't know if I even trust my own projections right now after looking around and everything else. My highest in that division in the AFC West is Austin Eckler. It's real simple. He was the highest guy I actually projected out at 358 fantasy points. I think he has another amazing season. There's nothing that scares me. They didn't add anything. The only thing that scares me a little bit is they did add a new offensive coordinator, and that does scare me a little bit on how the offense will change. I have him statted for 210 carries, 945 yards, 12 rushing touchdowns. I have him for 100 receptions, 680 yards, 4 more touchdowns, 358 fantasy points is what I have him statted out as. And now, I'm sorry, Jason. I'm throwing this out right now, but I'm sorry, Jason. A good buddy of ours who's been on this Javonte Williams train. This is not the year where he takes over. I don't have him as the highest points in that Denver backfield. That Denver backfield scares the crap out of me. Samaje Perine I have for less carries, 175 carries, 685 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, 45 receptions, 315 yards, 2 more receiving touchdowns, 181 fantasy points. Now, it's real close. I do have Williams for 176 fantasy points, but I have him with 190 carries, 738 yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, 39 receptions, 273 receiving yards, and only 1 touchdown through the air. I don't think that that's a backfield I really want to piece in. It's another one just like the Miami Dolphins, like you said, bye-week fill-in guys until we can see Williams is fully healthy. Because if he's not fully healthy and we see that early, P. Ryan's the guy. If he is fully healthy, I don't see how P. Ryan can hold on to that backfield with the talent that Williams does have. But that injury scares me this year. I think he's going to need a full year to recover from that.
Yeah, I haven't been a huge believer in Javonte Williams. I actually had Etienne ahead of him in that ranking of that rookie class the year those two came out. And I've just been anti Javonte Williams ever since. I took over a dynasty orphan team last year, and one of the first trades I made, Brant, was trading away Javonte Williams in that league for Travis Etienne, and I got Jerry Jeudy back in the trade, and I was pretty happy about that one. But yeah, so I'm fully on board with that, and Samaje Perine could be a sneaky fun play, especially if they take their time bringing Javonte Williams back into the fold. So, I think I'm in agreement with you on Samaje being the guy with more points there this year.
Yep. So that wraps up my division. Let's hear if you have a guy that you would like to sell. You threw that at me. I'm going to come back with my buy here in just a minute. I said Pacheco for my sell. What do you have for your sell?
If I had to pick a guy to sell, Brant, I think it'd be James Cook, honestly. And James Cook is not. It's easy to bat your eye at that and say, well, James Cook was never really a buy. But I was fairly high on James Cook in his rookie year. I got a lot of shares of him that maybe now I'm not so high on. I have him for kind of an abysmal season. I've got him at 155 fantasy points. I do have him as the guy leading that team in fantasy points out of the backfield. But Damian Harris, scares me, scares me there. And I do have Damian Harris sniffing really close in his fantasy numbers as well. So this is one that I could see going either way. And with it being that murky of water, Brant, I just don't want to own James Cook. So I'm not sure what I'd be looking for to get out of him in return, but he'd be one that I'd be willing to sell.
That's another one. He's that hype train has been. And what's funny is now you have hit both names in one of our very first trades that we have ever been able to come on. And that was with Sanders for Harris, one of our first years playing fantasy. But Harris is a guy that I've always believed in. And the way that Cook and Pacheco's hype this offseason is so high, those are two guys I'm definitely probably selling on. Now this one here, I'm going to circle back. This is a guy that I wanted to talk about, so I'm going to put this in with my buy. My receiving numbers are low on him because I forgot that Stafford got hurt last year, and that's Cam Akers. And we know that Baker does not throw the ball to running back, so my receiving numbers are down on him. I will have to retract the receiving part of this, but Cam Akers is a guy that I am buying. I am all in on buying. They didn't add anything else there besides Kerryon Williams, and you know my love for this man already out of Notre Dame. But Cam Akers, I have him for 246 rushes, 1,010 yards, 8 rushing touchdowns. And like I said, his receiving, I think I'm a little low on. I'm going to have to go back and do a little more research on how Stafford dumps the ball off. I have him for 19 receptions, 171 yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. I have him for 191 fantasy points. But this is a guy I'm buying on because this is a guy that I could easily see sneak into the top 10 running backs. Like I said, I have to go back and do a little more receiving work. But they didn't add anything that really scares me. Allen Robinson's gone. I know he wasn't big. They really don't have any wide receivers. They're getting fully back to healthy with Stafford coming back. Akers is now removed from his injury. This is a guy I'm buying in on.
Okay, Brant, I like that. I'm right there with you on Cam Akers. It took me a long time to get to that point, but I'm also a guy who is a firm believer in Cam Akers at this point and what it's going to look like next year.
I've hopped on that train. I've hopped off that train, and now I'm jumping right back on it. So eventually I'll stay somewhere.
I mean, to think there was a time and a place where you, me, and another buddy of ours sat down to do a big money league together, and almost the three of us almost got in a fist fight over Cam Akers and Antonio Gibson, and here we are at this point. Which it's funny because right now you have Cam Akers projected for 5 points more than Antonio Gibson that I have. So maybe we can rehash that argument. Maybe we could rehash that argument. For me, Brant, if I was going to buy a guy, this is sickening for me to say because I've been on him as a sell and I've sold him myself in person. But after I sat down and projected it and I statted it out, I really think Alvin Kamara has a pretty serviceable year this year. I think it's good enough for about a top 17 finish, give or take. So he's going to have some running back 1 weeks this year. I've got him for 192 carries, 864 yards to go along with 3 rushing touchdowns. So I'm not huge on his rushing upside this year, not with Jamal Williams there, but I've got him going for 60 receptions, 492 yards receiving, and another 3 touchdowns coming in at 231 fantasy points, Brant. And, the closer and closer we get to training camps coming, and there's still no suspension coming down the pipeline at this point, I'm beginning to think maybe there won't be a suspension for Alvin Kamara again this year. Maybe he gets another season under his belt and then eventually just retires before it happens. But I do think Alvin Kamara is in line for another decent year. I think Derek Carr really helps his passing upside.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as long as he stays, doesn't get suspended, I think he absolutely has a very good year. We saw what Jacobs did with Derek Carr under center and with his receiving and his explosive ability. I think Alvin Kamara has a very, very good year as long as he stays there. The goal line work is still going to get stolen by Jamal Williams or Taysom Hill, but the rest of the game will be all Alvin Kamara.
There you go.
So I want to talk about one more thing on my side before we sign off. And that's one of the most interesting backfields that everyone seems to say, oh, Jahmyr Gibbs. It's all Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't think it is. I think it's going to be a little closer than a lot of people think. I have them separated by 30 fantasy points. So Gibbs Montgomery. I think Montgomery is still the guy still a guy that's going to be very serviceable. I have Montgomery statted for 11 total touchdowns to Jahmyr Gibbs' 9 total touchdowns. Like I said, they're only serviceable by like 30 points. That Detroit backfield, I think, is a backfield that you could probably get a piece of and actually be happy with plugging that guy into your flex. So don't just jump on that Jahmyr Gibbs. Think about it. You can draft Gibbs in the top 5 rounds, or you can go down and get Montgomery and probably have roughly the same numbers in the double digits rounds, guys. So don't sleep on Montgomery this year. That is the most interesting backfield that I statted out, and I don't think it's going to be all Gibbs. So don't put all your eggs in that basket.
All right, Brant, talking about a backfield that you thought was interesting, I've got to go to one that I think is interesting here. And you may pinch yourself when you hear these numbers, but the Philadelphia Eagles backfield I don't think is going to shake out the way folks think it's going to. And I think it's going to be darn close in between these two guys. But I actually have Rashad Penny as the fantasy point leader coming out of the Philadelphia backfield, Brant. I have him for 186 carries, 855 yards rushing, to go along with 6 rushing touchdowns, 35 targets for 27 receptions, 210 yards receiving, 1 touchdown, 175.5 fantasy points. DeAndre Swift, I have for 173 carries, 795 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 44 targets for 31 receptions, 273 yards, and 3 additional touchdowns. Coming in, Brant, at 173.8 points, I have DeAndre Swift finishing 1.7 points behind his backfield mate, Rashad Penny. We both know this is an elusive dream because Rashad Penny probably won't stay healthy. But if he does, Brant, I think he is the back to own in Philadelphia.
I did my dance that whole time because I absolutely love that. I loved Penny coming into Seattle. He couldn't stay healthy. He finally gets behind a line that is a lot better than Seattle's ever had in his career. He gets a chance to show his explosive ability. If you guys know anything about Rashad Penny and you saw him back in college, this man is an amazing running back. I absolutely love him as the back to own there in Philly. I don't trust Swift. Detroit didn't trust Swift. Philly probably won't trust Swift by week 4 because Swift probably won't be on the field by week 4. So I'm hoping you're right. I'm hoping Penny's the guy to own. I'm going to cheer for that man till I'm blue in the face. It was the jersey his rookie year when I went to Seattle and saw him play. I bought it right there.
Just don't bend over to tie your shoes, Brant, and you can still cheer for Penny.
Yeah.
Get some Velcro, slip on something, otherwise you'll be blue in the face. All right, Brant. I don't want to put us too unrealistic here. I think coming back next week and doing wide receiver rankings is just unrealistic. It's probably going to be a while before we come back at you with wide receiver rankings, just because it's going to be that thing. Maybe, Brant, what we do this week is we come back next week with a consensus running back ranking show. You like the idea of that?
We can get our quarterbacks and running backs and put them both together and get our top 10
make
or
it,
top
make it
24.
Make just a little backfield sandwich between the quarterbacks and the running backs. All right.
I really think, and in my mind, I really think when we do these receivers, we're going to have to go division by division or 2 divisions at a time, because crunching those numbers and keeping track of our families at the same time is going to be a tough thing, but we're going to get her done for you guys eventually.
Well, there ain't no time for family when we're talking about dynasty fantasy. It don't work. You're either all the way in or you're all the way out. You got to be married to the game, Brant.
Yeah.
No, I do spend more time on Sleeper app than I do texting my wife, but that's just because my wife doesn't love me. So, but anyway, Brant. Anyway, I think we've pretty well knocked out these running backs here. It'll be interesting to see how the consensus rankings shake out as we put those together. But I think that pretty well wraps it up for today's show.
Absolutely. And as always, stay hungry
and stay fat, my friends.